So me and the rest of my college class were like vultures at this networking event. We were hovering around the senior accountants at the top firms in the country, waiting desperately for our moment to swoop in and make a little bit of small talk. We all had interviews with them the next day, so we wanted to make a good impression. So I'm surveying the room, waiting for my moment to swoop in, and I realized everybody here has got white skin, a lot of hair gel, and a sports coat on. I forgot most of those things at home. I didn't want to stand out, so I moved into a crowd, tried to join a conversation. Here's what they were talking about. So what do you guys like to do outside of school? Oh, me, I love to go to the driving range. The driving range, I love the driving range. I had no idea what a driving range was. I looked it up later. It has nothing to do with NASCAR. So I moved to a different crowd, tried to join a different conversation. Here's what they were talking about. So what was your favorite place to study abroad in? Mine was easily Paris. Oh, Paris was beautiful, but España takes the cake for me. Study abroad? Man, I could barely afford to study here, let alone in España. So I didn't want to bum everyone out, so I moved to a different crowd, tried to join their conversation, and at that point, I felt like a Roomba, like one of those robotic vacuum cleaners. Like I would hit a wall and then pivot, and then hit another wall and then pivot. Except instead of walls, it was just conversations that I didn't really give a shit about. And I did that for the rest of the night. When I went home, I couldn't go to sleep. Because if tonight was any indication, these interviews tomorrow were going to be horrible. I mean, I had nothing in common with these guys. Their hobbies were like fishing and golfing and investing. And my hobbies were like smoking weed and watching the Discovery Channel and then doing both of those things at the same time. I felt like there was a machine somewhere just pumping out perfect replicas of the consummate accountant. These guys with their sports talk and their upper middle class pastimes. And if that was the model, then I felt like a defective product, and no one was going to want a defective product. But I couldn't give up now. I mean, I spent the last 4 years studying the least attractive college major of all time. I spent tuition on this. If I didn't get this job, then what was this all for? I needed this job. So the next day I had 4 interviews back to back, one with a different company, and I brought my A game. I prepped my small talk. I borrowed my roommate's hair gel. When it was time for my first interview, I walked in the room. There was a guy who's a little bit older than me, and he had this very fit build, very sporty, and he had this dark green lanyard on. And I recognized it, so I pointed at it and I said, "Hey man, are you an Eagles fan?" "Heck yeah, bro, how about you?" "You know it." Nailed it. I sat down. I was really glad he didn't ask me who my favorite player was. He pulls out my resume, and he says, "Jason Pangilinan. That's your name. Pangilinan, is that a Filipino last name?" "Yeah, it is. How did you know?" And now I'm super excited because maybe he wants to ask me about being Filipino. I would love to talk about that. He says, "My last girlfriend was Filipino." "Never again." Guys, I had so many questions. Except it was an interview, so he also had a lot of questions. He would ask me like, "Okay, Jason, it looks like you worked at Panera Bread for 2 years. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?" It was good, but I'm thinking to myself like, what did he mean by that? He just means like, no Filipinos ever again? "Jason, looks like you had pretty good grades. How was it like to balance work and school at the same time?" It was good, but I'm thinking to myself like, did he not like our food? I feel like that's a character flaw on his part. "Jason, are you okay?" It was good, but I'm thinking to myself like, man, what did this girl do to him? He didn't really enjoy that conversation because it wasn't much of a conversation at all. He shook my hand. He told me it was nice to meet me, and I walked out of that room with no job. And that really bummed me out, but I didn't have time to think about who did what wrong, things I should have said. So I just refreshed myself. I just reset, thought about the next interview. When it was time for the second interview, I walked in the room. There was an older lady sitting at the desk. She had this impeccable posture, like the kind that makes you want to correct yourself as soon as you walk in the room. And she had these very deep frown lines. And when I looked at her desk, she had her phone out, and there was a picture of her and 2 little kids, and that's when I realized why she has those frown lines. She's a mom. Moms love me. This is going to go great. So I pointed at her phone, and I said, "Hey, are these your 2 kids? They're very cute. How old are they?" "Oh, they're 5 and 7. I was 5 and 7 at one point. Why don't you tell me a little more about them?" And she did so smiling. And she kept going until a point where she said, "Okay, Jason, I loved talking about my kids. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?" And so she pulls out my resume, And I finally feel like I'm getting another shot, and she goes through, she says, okay, Jason, looks like you have pretty good work experience, looks like you have good grades. What's this? It says you organized an event for over 200 people. That's very impressive. Why don't you tell me about that? Sure, so last summer I organized a sex positivity seminar for the incoming freshmen at my school. I just wanted to make sure that they knew how to explore safely and responsibly. Excuse me? Last summer I organized a safe sex positivity seminar. I just think that's a little young. I don't know, they were 18. I feel like I just wanted them to be, safe than sorry. And she said, I think that's very inappropriate. Oh, okay, do you want to talk about, I used to work at Panera Bread. She didn't want to talk about that. She shook my hand, she told me it was nice to meet me. She was lying. I walked out of that room with no job. Good grades, right? Good work experience, but no job. I mean, I didn't get it. I couldn't get through one conversation just talking about my qualifications. It always had to come up somehow that I'm a little bit different. So I'm done with this. I'm done trying to make people feel comfortable with me. I'm done with the small talk. They're not getting Jason Light anymore. They're about to get Jason Unfiltered. It was time for my third interview. I walked in that room. I said, hi, hello, how are you? And he said, how was the networking event last night? So I told him, it was weird. I think it's super disingenuous for you to have us walk to a room, talk to people we don't know about nothing that has to do with the job, and have that be the way you're picking the best accountant for your company. It doesn't make any sense. That man took one look at me and he said, Jason, I completely agree. Really? Yeah, I felt the same way 5 years ago when I was in your shoes, and I felt the same way today sitting across from you. It is really awkward, but it's part of the process, so relax. You can sit down. I feel like me and you are going to get along just fine. And we did. We had a great conversation. He didn't say anything that I thought might be racist. I didn't tell him about that time that I taught a bunch of kids how to fuck right. And he never said it was nice to meet you. He said, I look forward to working with you. Guys, I told you I had a fourth interview. I didn't go. I didn't have to. I got the job. I was one of them. I was an accountant. Thank you, guys.